Cup final is upon us. It is tomorrow, and I'm really looking forward to it because we're going to see either Samoa get their revenge when they could have actually probably won that first match, if not for a good 3, 4, 5 blunders when it came to scoring tries. There was either foot over the sideline when a try was scored, or a drop ball here, or just a mistake there. It was just all over the place for Samoa, but they looked just so much better against Tonga, and New Zealand did whoop Tonga as well. But I do feel like tomorrow's matchup has just everything going for it, which is really, really exciting. You know, there's a lot of questions in regards to the halves. You've got an aging Kieran Foran, well, not aging. This is his last ever game in rugby league. You got Dylan Brown, who was fantastic, but he's making a move in the NRL, which is a lot going on there. Whilst you've got for Samoa's team, Jerome Luai, who I don't necessarily believe is a 7, but when he plays with Samoa, he does play some decent 7, just not necessarily for the Tigers overall. I feel like there's a lot of question marks still there, but he's very experienced and he knows what he's doing. And then you've got Blaise Salangi, who is inexperienced and still learning the ropes of it all and really getting into it. So there's a lot of questions there. You know, Fisher Harris and Payne Haas going up against each other. There are so many questions about this game. So let's get into it, guys. Hey guys, how you going? Sit down, BK Sport. It is time to preview the Samoa versus New Zealand Pacific Cup final. And we've got some of the biggest key facts over here and the biggest questions that I'm asking about this game. Now, we've got New Zealand beating Tonga 40-14 and Samoa 24-18 so far in this Pacific Cup, while Samoa have beaten Tonga 34-6, breaking a 6-game losing streak. We will be live for this game tomorrow, guys, which is really exciting. Then we've got the Pacific Cup stats, which is New Zealand have scored 64 points, conceding 32, while Samoa have scored 52 points, whilst conceding 30. So to really dive into that one just quickly, it does show there that New Zealand, their attack is flowing. They are really getting it moving. They've got a great team there. And despite the fact that Kieran Foran, this is his last tournament and these last games, he is still able to deliver a great performance there from that 7, alongside Dylan Brown getting it moving as well. We all know Jerome Hughes will be back for the World Cup and whatnot next year. But this New Zealand team is getting that attacking rhythm flowing. And defensively, 32 points isn't too bad. But with Samoa, they've conceded less, but they have scored 12 less points, which is why I do question the inexperience there of Blaise Salangi and also the proven experience of Jerome Luai, but he's more of a 6. Is he able to really define this Samoan team and get them going into this game? They did only lose, as I said, 24-18 to New Zealand in the first game that they did play, but there was a real notion about it where Samoa could have won that game and probably should have won that game. However, New Zealand were still the better team in that game. There was a lot more forward motion. They were really dominant. They just weren't able to put the game to bed, in my opinion. While Samoa, they just kind of hung around and they had enough in them, but there were quite a few mistakes, which ultimately their attack was decent enough to get 18 points. They should have had more, and realistically, you just need to come together more on that attacking unit and get that rhythm flowing effectively, which didn't necessarily happen in that first game, despite the fact that, again, I believe they probably should have won that game just if they could have held the ball or didn't put their foot over the sideline. You know, just little niche things like that. Well, not even niche things. They are pretty obvious things, but that is what lost them the game. It is what lost them the game overall. So defensively, they have only conceded 2 points less than New Zealand, which is kind of a wash, but still shows that this game should be played in a real defensive motion. And then on the attack, 12 points less is a decent amount in the 2 games, especially considering they've played each other once. And then the Tongan team, where Tonga won 40-14, Samoa beat Tonga 34-6. But that game was quite heavily impacted as well, that Samoa-Tonga game, where with 20 minutes to go, Tonga were not necessarily looking in it, but there was still a brief chance that they could come back in the game. And then once we came back from that lightning delay, which was like an hour and a half or whatever, you could see that Tonga just weren't ready for it. And then Samoa really wanted it. And they just went on with it. So that was a good sign. But when the game was in the fluid motion at that 60 minutes, it was still not necessarily out of range for Tonga to win. So that is a bit of a concern there for Samoa, that the delay did work in their favour, but you're not always going to get a delay. I think we've seen one other one this year, which was the Bulldogs and Rabbitohs game maybe in the NRL. Outside of that, you don't usually see that. That is an interesting little thought process there. I've also got Samoa have never won a major international trophy, whilst New Zealand recently won the Pacific Championship in 2023, where they beat Australia 30-0. Yes, I've got to always say it. They did lose by a decent margin the week beforehand, but then in the game that mattered, they did win 30-0, and they also won the World Cup in 2008. So that does show, New Zealand know how to win these tournaments, especially when it's not up against Australia. And even in 2008, they beat Australia. But New Zealand definitely has a lot more prowess in winning trophies, and they are clearly the second best international team that is across the rugby league, landscape. They are very clearly just that step below Australia, because Australia consistently win everything, and then New Zealand are the team that wins when Australia don't, I guess. So New Zealand know how to win this. They know how to get the job done, but they had a really disappointing Pacific Cup in 2024 where they did lose to Tonga 25-24. They did lose to Australia, and they didn't even make the final. And they had to play Papua New Guinea in the promotion relegation game where they scored, 50 points in that game. But also Papua New Guinea are that a couple of steps down realistically from New Zealand. So whilst New Zealand do know how to win these kind of tournaments, they also have that ability to not perform at the level that we would expect them to, which is what we saw last year. And it's a really dramatic change around from what we saw from Tonga, where they won 25-24 in 2024, and then this year just got absolutely slaughtered in both games. Really interesting what's going on with Tonga right now. Obviously very disappointed with the Elias Katoa situation, but really interesting that Tonga did not come into this tournament with any ability, really. There was no good signs. There just wasn't. They got monster in the forwards in both games. Their backline didn't do anything, and their halves couldn't get anything going. There wasn't anything really to take from this tournament. Last year, there was so much to take. There was so much positivity. And then this year, it was just, they dropped off a cliff. I don't know what happened there. Is it that Samoa and New Zealand are just, this year, well and truly better? And are they going forward better? And what's happening with Tonga long term? There is a lot of questions there with Tonga, which we might talk about in a video at a later date. But look, New Zealand, as I said, do have the ability to go and win this competition because they've done it before, while Samoa have never won anything. So there's history. So a pro there is that this team can create history by being the first Samoan team to win an international major trophy. But then we go down to the next point, which is if Samoa are to win, is it time to force a rethink in how the International Rugby League tier system is adjudicated? Because look, it's a very difficult discussion process in regards to the tiering system, because it's not like rugby union where the team that is on top and the team through the top 10, or just in general, those teams are effectively decide about matches played against other opposition and who is the best at the moment. It really is more about the results. Whilst in rugby league, it's more about the development systems and the internal country operations, like full professional domestic leagues and youth systems and all that kind of jazz. Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3 isn't actually about how a team is looking. It's not really a good showing for the results of a team. It's kind of got nothing to do with that, really. But what I'm saying is that is there a point now where we get to the discussion process where we say, well, this doesn't make sense. We've got a Tier 2 team consistently beating Tier 1 teams. Maybe not Australia, because they did lose to Australia Samoa in the 2021 World Cup final. But to get to the final, they did beat England, who is a Tier 1 nation. And if they win here tomorrow, they beat New Zealand to win a major trophy, which is another Tier 1 nation. So that would really lean to the fact that why are we calling them a Tier 2 nation when they're beating out these Tier 1 nations? Does it really make sense to be talking about these Tier 1 and Tier 2 on a developmental system and from the ground roots up? Does it make sense to call them Tier 2 still, despite the fact that they are beating up these Tier 1 nations? And I would love to see them play Australia. And if Australia's form against England, even though Australia's won both their games against England, if Australia's form against England is anything to go by, well, it's not exactly spectacular. It really isn't. So could Samoa, and this has been a conversation that's been had online, Samoa currently beat Australia? Maybe. I don't think so. I still think Australia probably gets the job done. But the question is there, based off of the form that we're seeing from this current international series. So that's why there would be a question, in my opinion. Is the rugby league tier system still the right way to go about it, despite the fact that a Tier 2 team is relatively consistently beating out these top tier teams? Now, I do know that a bit of bite back there would be in 2023, Samoa played in the Pacific Cup, and also 2024, Samoa played against England and lost their games to England over there. I think it was 3 games that they lost, so that is a big talking point. And then the year before that, they were in the Pacific Cup, and they really didn't bring a team that even tried to compete realistically. When they got a full-strength team, they're very highly competitive, as you can see now. But in 2023, they got absolutely smacked by New Zealand 50-0 or something, and got smacked by Australia in a similar margin. And it seemed like they didn't really kind of take any emphasis in caring about that tournament, which was really strange, and they got slaughtered because of it. So there is that thought process, but when fully healthy and whatnot, they are getting results. And again, if they win tomorrow, then in the two big time tournaments, being the Pacific Cup and the World Cup, their last two results were besides losing to Australia in a confident but close enough margin in the World Cup final, I think it's 30-12 or something like that, but to beat out England and beat New Zealand. So I just feel like the question needs to be asked, is the Rugby League tier system still the most viable option for how we deliver tier 1 and tier 2 products? Let's get into the team list that we're going to be seeing, which is a slightly different to when they played a couple of weeks ago. So for New Zealand, they've got Charles Nicoll-Klokstad in the fullback in game 1. In this game, they've now got Keanu Kenny, which shifts Charles Nicoll-Klokstad into the centres. I'm a Titans fan, of course. I really like this change. I think that Keanu Kenny is absolutely spectacular. I thought he had a really good game, despite being injured for the most part of this year, pretty much all of this year. You know, I think he played against maybe the Tigers in the NRL before he came back to play in that game against Tonga, and then now is playing against Samoa. So I really do like this switch up, and Charles definitely can come into that centre, which does mean that Casey McLean is not centre anymore, and he goes out to the wing. Ronaldo Mulatalo is injured, so he won't be playing this one. He's a fantastic player, but there is a little bit of a shift up here. Mati Tomoko stays in that centre, and so does Jermaine Isako on the wing. So nothing changes with the 2 and the 3. It's just the 1, 4, and 5 have had a bit of a mix around. Obviously, in regards to the halves, you're not going to see a difference between Dylan Brown and Kieran Foran. Really good luck to Kieran Foran in his last ever game. Would love to see him score a try. It'd be so incredible. And then you go to the forwards. I don't think there's much change here. So when they played against Samoa the first time, they had Fisher Harris, Marshall King, Leota, Nakora, Isaiah Papali'i, and Joseph Tarpany. Whilst this time around, they had Fisher Harris, Crossland. So it is not Marshall King. They've got Crossland in it, Moses Leota, Britt Nakora, Isaiah Papali'i, and Joseph Tarpany. So nothing changes except for the number 9, where I do prefer Marshall King, but I don't think when Crossland's a really hard player to read. Very, very difficult player to read, because sometimes he can be really decent. I won't say amazing, but really decent. Sometimes he can be really poor. Really, really poor. Like, there is a gigantic gap. There isn't kind of a basic area, a generalized area where Crossland is. He's either really decent or really bad. I don't really see him usually here. So I really need to see him obviously get to this really decent section. And you've got such a fantastic team here. It's really difficult to, see a play for the Newcastle Knights and then see a play for New Zealand. It's like the talent that's around here for Crossland in New Zealand is far superior to what you've got with the Newcastle Knights. So you should expect him every single time to play here. And I do think he played at this level when it was against the Tongans in the most recent matchup. But I don't think it's a dramatic change. Marshall King is solid, but I don't think he's got a high ceiling. I don't think he's absolutely out of this world. I don't necessarily think he's got a low floor, though. I think he is very much generalised in this kind of section of the quality scale, So I don't think it's a massive switch up there. And then in the interchange, you've got Tamati Martin, Nafahu White, Aaron Clark, and Xavier Willison in this game. In the first game, they had Phoenix Crossland on the bench, Nafahu White, Aaron Clark, and Nelson Asafa Solomona. So a lot of changes there. Tamati Martin, not the 9 that Phoenix Crossland is the 14. Tamati Martin more so in the halves. I guess can play a bit of fullback, but they've got plenty of fullbacks in this team, especially with Chance shifting into the centres when he is a fullback and Counters there. They've got plenty of opportunity to put him back there if they really wanted to. But Tamati Martin could shift in there. Can obviously play the halves if something was to happen to Kieran Foran or Dylan Brown. And that is a better setup for mine. I do feel like I actually prefer the setup of, I'd probably go with Marshall King. But Marshall King and Tamati Martin is the 9 and the 14. Or if you want to say Crossland and Tamati Martin, I do really like that setup a little bit better because you know what you're going to get for the most part out of Marshall King. And same thing, I guess, with Crossland. Tamati Martin is able to go and cover in different positions rather than those guys who are specifically a 9. Nafahu White's had a fantastic year for the Roosters this year. Aaron Clark should have been the player of the year for the Warriors, and Xavier Willison is a monster for the Brisbane Broncos. So I do think it is an improvement from Nelson Sofasana to Xavier Willison. Aaron Clark's obviously great. Nafahu White's great. And then I do actually, like I said, like the setup there between the switch up at the 14, Crossland into Tamati Martin, and then Crossland's now the 9. So this is a good New Zealand team, and they've got the extra replacements being Scotty Sorensen, Zach Docker-Clay, and Josiah Katapani. I would probably assume that they're going to chuck in, or I don't know if they put Scotty Sorensen. I don't know what they'll do there. Maybe Zach Docker-Clay because he's more of a utility, but Scotty Sorensen is the best name that they do have there on the 3, so I'm not too sure. But this is a good New Zealand team. I actually do think it situates itself better. I think this New Zealand team is better than what it was in week 1 of the Pacific Cup because Keanu Kenny's incredible. Chance is still great and is still on the team. Big body there in the centres, and overall, they should, for mine, be even better than what we saw in week 1. And they were really good. They just weren't clinical enough to put the game to bed. And we move over to Samoa here. The differences in their team. So, Jeremiah Nene is out of this game. And then the fullback is Rota Tuivasa Shek, who was the fullback then. The wingers were Brian To'o, Murray Talangi, Isaac Tungo, and Dean Marin in the centres. Are there any changes there? No. Brian To'o, Isaac Tungo, Dean Mariner, and Murray Talangi. You go to the halves, Blaze Talangi, Jerome Luai. That is the same that we saw. And then you go to the forwards of Josh Papali'i and Payne Haas, who started in that first game. And then this time it's Francis Molo and Payne Haas, which I find quite interesting. I do think that Papali'i off the bench is fine, but on name you probably would have been thinking that he'd be partnering alongside Payne Haas. But Francis Molo can do enough of a job. He's not an incredible player, but I probably still would have gone with Papali'i and Payne Haas in the front row. And Francis Molo with his just big, tough body, just running in hard, coming in off the bench. That's probably what I would have preferred there. But I can understand what they're trying to achieve. The number 9 is Jazz Tavanga. He played in the first one as well. And then the back row was Jeremiah Nene, Jaden Sewer, and the 13 was Junior Bolo. So Jeremiah Nate's obviously not playing. So Jaden Sewer and Simi Sasangi comes into the back row with Junior Bolo as the 13. Jaden Sewer and Bolo obviously the same, but Simi Sasangi is an interesting one because I don't really know what position this bloke plays in. I really don't. When Canberra Raiders in the finals this year against the Sharks, you saw that Ethan Strange was out, so he was playing as a 5'8" in that game, which wasn't his position at all. And he kind of just gets mixed around. He's definitely a forward/halves utility, I guess. I feel like maybe I've seen him in centre once. Maybe I could be completely wrong there, so do forgive me for that. But it is a downgrade. Like, let's be completely honest with you here. Jeremiah Nene, whilst he has very much defensive susceptibilities and can fall apart defensively, he does have an enormous range of attack, while Simi Sasangi, it's quite basic overall. Like, he can pop up at random times, which is great. But overall, the consistency probably isn't there from Nene, compared to Nene. And that's weird because I wouldn't necessarily say Jeremiah Nene is a overall consistent player, but he does have a lot of talent there. Then we go to the interchange with Chanel Harris-Tavita, Benai Uelu, Terrell May, and Josh Papali'i. Is this changed? It is a little bit. It was Chanel Harris-Tavita, Simi Sasangi, Francis Molo, and Ata Mariota who was the interchange in the first game. So I actually prefer this interchange. I do prefer this interchange, especially with Terrell May getting onto that bench. Uelu is solid enough. Harris-Tavita obviously can play in multiple different positions there. Funny that Harris-Tavita is the 14 for Samoa and Tamati Martin is the 14 for New Zealand with what they do for the Warriors. But overall, I do really like that Samoan bench in comparison to the first game because, look, Adamayota, I don't think should be on the bench here comparatively to the guys we've got here. Overall, I would maybe question Harris-Tavita and Benai Uelu both being in it. Like, I guess he could have chucked in another forward there instead of Uelu, but I get what they're doing. And then the 18th, with the extras, Adam Mariota, Ativalu Lisati, Clayton Faulalo, and Lycan King Tugia. Lycan King Tugia is an interesting one there, considering Dragons. I don't think Faulalo gets that 18th man. It probably is going to be Ata Mariota. But if they wanted to have extra potential depth in the halves, if a situation happened there, I guess they'd put King Tugia into the 18, but they probably do just lean with Adam Mariota. Overall, I think that the reason I would have tipped Samoa is based on the fact that in that first game that we did see, I probably would have lent towards them. I probably would have lent to them on based off of that game alone, because the improvement from that game into the Tonga game and then into this game, they should have been able to sort out their inefficiencies on the clinicalness of their attack. But the issue is that there is a bit of changes here, and I do feel like New Zealand are better than what they were in that game 1 matchup. So I am going to tip New Zealand here. I am going to tip them 1-12, but there is still a world where New Zealand can win this one by a decent margin, and there is a world where Samoa win as well. This is not an easy game to predict. I do feel like there should be a result for New Zealand here. I feel like they should get the job done. You know, we did see Samoa do well against Tonga, but we also saw New Zealand do even better against Tonga, and we did see New Zealand already beat Samoa. So I do think this should be a close game. The biggest concern that I do have is New Zealand need to perform at that same consistent, solid level on the forwards, because this forward pack for Samoa is obviously led by the best front rower in the game in Payne Haas, which you could even argue is all time, to be fair, by the end of his career. Now that he's got a premiership as well, and if he gets this, it would be even massive, because now it's a Pacific Cup championship as well. But this four pack is big and very solid there. You know, Jaden Sewer has played for Queensland. Payne Haas, New South Wales, premiership winner for the Broncos. Francis Mollo's even played for Queensland, I believe. I think so. Yes, I think he has. Junior Bolo, he's played for New South Wales. These guys are very big and know what they're doing. But I just see the talent for this New Zealand team and I go, gee whiz, how do they get beat? You know, how do they get beat now? If it was the same team from week 1 to now, I would have probably tipped Samoa. But now that I look at it and I see Keanu in that fullback, the way New Zealand put Tonga to bed just really easily, I've got to go New Zealand here. Yeah, I do. I've got to go tip New Zealand. But as I said, if Samoa does get up and get the W, it might be time to rethink how the tier system is adjudicated. I really do. Oh, by the way, if you are wondering why that's at 6:05 p.m. on Sunday, it's not. That's just my time. I'm in Fiji currently. But that is just a little bit of extra for you. I just need to clarify so you didn't think that that was what the time is tomorrow. We will be live for the game, so if you want to sit and chat and talk about it and all that kind of jazz, then be here for it. Obviously, guys, hit that thumbs up button, subscribe. We did put a video out yesterday about Daly Cherry Evans and Sydney Roosters, so if you want to go check that out, do go check it out. We are doing a lot more videos on the channel in the off-season, considering that usually we stream every single game, and now they're kind of slowing down, so we want to, you know, push out some more video content while we can. But all right, guys, I appreciate you. Like I said, thumbs up, subscribe. Let me know your thoughts. Give me your predictions. Give me your tips in the comment section. Looking forward to seeing them, and I'll see you guys tomorrow for the game. Thanks for watching. Catch you later. See ya.